WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wisconsineye.org/donate or by texting WisConsinEye to 44321.
Ben Franklin of De Pere is a Republican candidate in the 88th Assembly District. He is from De Pere. The election is November 5th. Ben Franklin, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you for participating in our candidate interview.
Okay.
I want to start by asking you, what's your campaign's key message? Why are you running for this office?
So our key message is we really genuinely care about our country and the state of Wisconsin. I served most of my adult life in the United States Air Force, and my family and my kids supported me in that. They followed me around all over the country. But what was nice about that is it allowed us to see the best of what our country has to offer. And when we came to look at our house when we were getting out of the military in Wisconsin, up in De Pere, I remember going to a Quick Trip, and some random gentleman opened the door. And that's not something that happens everywhere across the country. And I turned to my wife and I said, "We're back in the Midwest, we're home." And so it's a great community, and we really care a lot about it. We love where we live. Our kids never want to move. And so we just want to keep it a great community. It's certainly not perfect, but we want to insert ourselves to help in the best way that we can to serve the community.
So if you're elected to the Assembly, what's an example of a bill that would be a priority for you to introduce?
Yeah, so something I'd like to see is I have a gentleman that works for us. We have about 200 employees with businesses that I'm in charge of running, and he's on a disability of some form, and so he can't work past a certain amount of hours in any given week, or he can't earn over a certain dollar amount. He has to just leave, and he can't take any pay raises or things like that, or he starts losing certain benefits. And so I'd like to really look, I'm not currently in the legislator, and so I'd like to look at that, why that is, and see if we can help people that really want to get a little bit more hours, earn a little bit more money without sacrificing benefits, and see if we can come to some agreement on that.
That benefits cliff, sure.
Yeah.
If you enter the legislature, you'll be entering during a biennial budget year, and the state of Wisconsin is projected to have a more than $3 billion surplus. What would be your top two priorities for use of that surplus spending or funding?
Yeah, so before I get into two priorities, I think it's always important to make sure that we are responsible or wise stewards of that money. And so we want to maintain a surplus. A lot of states can't say that they have that. And so I think that that's important. That being said, there are two things that I would really like to do. I'd like to look at, and I actually heard this from a gentleman when I was knocking doors, and I thought it was a great idea. As we're out there, and he said, "Why don't we use that money to pay off debts?" And as I've thought about that, that's a great approach, because as we take out big loans and things like that from a business standpoint, you have interest rates and everything. And so if we can pay off some of those, just cash, boom, pay it off, that frees up additional cash flow for the future as well. So I think that would be one of those things that would certainly be important. And then finally, I think the second piece would try to give as much money of that back to the taxpayers that paid into it in the first place.
What does that look like? What does a tax cut or tax reform look like?
Yeah, so I think you can do that in one of two ways. You can either, I'm not a huge fan of like just writing a check and saying, here you go. I think that we've seen how that's affected inflation in a not very positive way across the country. But I think we can do certainly tax breaks when we look at the biennium and those tax breaks that are written in there. Those are certainly very important, especially as if you look around the state of Wisconsin, there's more and more school referendums that seem to be popping up, and that hits the taxpayers' dollars. And so that's where it becomes more important to have those in place.
You mentioned K-12 education or property taxes, funding education. K-12 education is a leading issue for many voters. What would be your campaign's top priority for education?
Well, top priority is, I think, of course, everybody wants to make sure that they're funded, right? We always want to give better to our rising generation than we had, and I think everybody on both sides of the aisle can agree to that. I think that we need to do it responsibly, though, responsible spending, making sure that we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. I think that it's important to look at the allocation of funds. So when we're doing referendums or if we're allocating the funds in some other way, where's that money going to? I'd like to see, I think teachers have been underpaid for a very long time. In fact, when I graduated high school, I'm going to age myself for a second, about 25 years ago, I really wanted to be a music teacher. I was an all-state musician, and I had a passion for it. But when I started going to school for it, I was like, man, this is not going to pay the bills at the end of the day. It's not going to be able to raise a family, at least not in a way that I wanted to. And so I think that we need to make sure that teachers who spend a copious amount of time with our kids, we need to make sure that they're paid appropriately.
What about higher education? What does the future of Wisconsin's four-year colleges, two-year colleges, technical colleges look like to you, and how should the legislature focus on higher ed?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's certainly paramount, I think, to the overall success and contribution to a society. You know, when you're looking at whether people choose to go a four-year university, a two-year college, or even a technical college, or just simply into the workforce after college. We didn't really talk about that, but a lot of people choose to do that. But as far as the higher education you're asking about, I think that we need to make sure that we have measuring sticks in place. You know, again, I'm sure that you probably want to know about the funding on that too, and I think my approach to that is very similar on the K-12 as the higher education. But we really want to have measuring sticks in place that when they're coming out of these technical college and two-year colleges and four-year colleges, that they're contributing to the employers. If you're an employer, like I'm an employer, if I hire somebody that's right out of college, I would hope that they have leading cutting-edge technology and ideas that are really going to help propel our business. And I think sometimes what we see is businesses are trying to train people on the fly when I think there's always going to be those specifics to each individual business, but we really want to have them come in and really help propel the companies right out of the gate.
So you'd have some accountability measures for the way that students are coming out of higher ed and whether or not they have certain skills?
Yeah, and then I think, DSPS as well. I think when people are coming out of technical colleges and they're trying to go get certifications and stuff, we really got to find better ways to streamline that. I was recently talking with a lady who runs an electrician business up in northeast Wisconsin, and she was saying that's one of their big hurdles. They have a large amount of people are getting ready to retire or already retiring, and it's so hard to get people through the certification process in the state of Wisconsin. And so I think we need to look at that and find ways to help businesses. This
maybe ties into this question here. What do you see as the state's largest workforce development challenge, and how would you propose addressing it?
Yeah, and it does play into it. I think it's people. I think as a state, what I just talked about, that's certainly important. But I also feel like we can do probably a better job as a state on what we have to offer here. I used to be an in-service recruiter in the military, and I cannot tell you how many times I heard over and over and over again from people that, hey, I'm moving to Florida, or I'm moving to Texas, or they're moving somewhere else because it's sunshine and they have great military benefits or whatever reasons there are, right? They didn't have any family ties or anything. They were going there for those reasons. So we can't do anything about the sunshine, but we have a beautiful state. We have a lot of resources that I think that we can capitalize on and market those to other people that, hey, you're doing this job somewhere else, come do it in Wisconsin, and here's why, right? And so I think we need to be able to capture that.
Another workforce question for you. Investments in public and energy infrastructure grow our state's economy. This also provides an opportunity to invest in our state's workforce, but currently there are no requirements for hiring local workers. Mm-hmm. Would you support a state resident hiring requirement for state, local, and utility scale infrastructure investments?
No, I would not. I think I think everybody, and I would hope this is on both sides of the aisle, I think everybody would prefer to have all those work go through Wisconsin workers, especially if it's being paid with Wisconsin tax dollars. I think that most people would agree with that. However, I think that there may be instances where, due to the complexity of the job or the time restraints that you're going against, or there's a myriad of different factors that may play into it, where it may be beneficial to look out and bring somebody in. But I think the goal is to always try to put that money back in Wisconsin taxpayers' pockets.
employee classification is an issue in the construction industry. Some employers misclassify workers as independent contractors or pay them in cash off the books. This lowers costs by avoiding payroll taxes and unemployment insurance, and it puts compliant companies at a disadvantage when bidding on projects. Plus, misclassified workers may be denied minimum wage protections or overtime pay. Are you aware of this, and what do you think should be done about it?
Well, I've heard of it. I've read over this question actually briefly, and I think it's unfortunate if people are intentionally doing that, and I think that certainly needs to be addressed. I would be very surprised if anybody anywhere, even a kid mowing a lawn, is getting paid less than minimum wage where it's currently set at. But yeah, I've read the question. I don't really know how much that's going on. I do think that we need to be careful, though, when you're looking at it from a legislative standpoint, because we have a lot of contractors throughout the state that do really good work. I'll use DoorDash as an example. I know there's been a lot of discussion in the state legislature in past years over that, but they're contractors. And maybe they want the freedom to go, hey, one day I want to drive for DoorDash, one day I want to drive for Uber. I know that you're asking about construction, but I think the overall principle still applies, and I think we got to be careful not to over-legislate that idea.
Affordable rental housing is an issue in Wisconsin. Yeah. Some support government-imposed rent control to maintain affordability, while others argue keeping rent artificially low will decrease rental supply, resulting in increased prices. What is your sense of housing as an issue, and which best addresses rental housing affordability, rent control or building more rentals?
Yeah, I would not support rent control. I think if you look at some of the states that have implemented those sort of things, it doesn't really end up very well. I think it the idea sounds good, but it really hurts the consumer at some point, the renter at some point, and then it really restricts the landlord or property owner of reinvesting in their investments and keeping them nice and things like that. So I wouldn't really support that piece. I think we do have a housing crisis. I think a lot of people around the state of Wisconsin and certainly around the country are feeling that. Where I'm at, we're experiencing tremendous growth in De Pere and the whole 88th district, Alloway, Bellevue. And so I think the solution there is, of course, find ways to help the builders associations, the realtors associations, those people be able to build more housing, affordable housing, quicker. And the answer to that, I feel, again, I'm not a current sitting legislator, so I'm on the outside looking in, but I feel like the answer to that is to really help get rid of some of the red tape. If I have 1 second, I just want to tell a quick story. We just got done building a new store, for our business, and we just opened up a week and a half ago. This was supposed to open back in April, but due to a lot of the red tape and the delays, we just now opened. And whenever there's delays like that, the costs go up due to restocking fees or redeployment fees, and you have to the owners still has to keep paying all these things. And so housing is very similar as well. If you go over timelines, that's going to end up being more expensive for the consumer.
Transitioning to healthcare, medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system in western Wisconsin. What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future closures? Yeah,
this is a wonderful question. One of the things that are very important to people in our district is access to affordable quality health care, and I'm sure that's consistent across the state. I'm familiar with the hospitals you're talking about out in western Wisconsin. I think one of the big problems is here in Wisconsin, this is something I'd certainly like to look at, is we have a lot of people that are on Badger Care, otherwise known as Medicaid. And we have it peaked out last year at 1.68 million people, which is 28% of the Wisconsin population that's on an assistant thing. So I want to look at that, why we have so many people on it, and try to help people get off of that if we're able to. And then the other thing is when those things get reimbursed to hospitals and healthcare providers, it only pays 65%, which is 27% below the national average. And so that makes it very difficult. What could those hospitals and providers and all the staff that work at those places have done with that extra money? If
we support an increase in Medicaid reimbursement?
I would support that. Again, I want to make sure that it is in line with budget. I want to be responsible about it, but I would support that, yeah.
Mental health care is also a growing concern for Wisconsinites and concern for state and county budgets. In your district, what are you hearing about mental health care and how would you address it?
Yeah, mental health care is a growing concern everywhere. Again, I was in the military. I'll refer to that again. And I think that they're kind of ahead of the civilian sector just because there's been a cloud over the military for such a long time. I think the civilian sector is doing a lot of really good work on catching up. I think we got a ways to go. One thing, I'm not a mental health care provider, and so I would like to really work with healthcare providers to really find viable solutions for people that are dealing with those issues throughout our communities.
How should Wisconsin move forward on the issue of abortion?
Great question, and this has been a question of conflict for a long time. I can tell you my stance on abortion. My abortion is I'm pro-life, I value life. I do believe there are exceptions, though, so pro-life with exceptions, such as
what exceptions?
Yeah, such as rape, incest, and life of the mother. I think those are very important to make sure that we protect those. I know that the question occasionally comes up, would you support any specific timeline? I don't know if you're going to ask me that or not, but when I hear that question, I think that needs to go toward the voters, honestly, and let the voters decide on that issue.
Transitioning to transportation.
Yeah.
What are the pressing transportation needs in your district, and how important is it that these needs are addressed and for the state to keep on schedule with the reconstruction of aging interstates and significant corridors of commerce?
Yeah, so it's super important, and I'm a statistics guy, so I'll go back to my statistics. The people that live in the 88th district, about 81% of them drive themselves to work and back every day. And a significant amount of those are commuting over to Appleton or the Fox Valley area, just around all of the area. And so we get significant usage on our highway system. And so that's very important. We also, it's a major highway system, the I-41 and the 43 that goes down through toward Milwaukee. And so it's important to keep those because it allows the semis and all our transportation of goods to keep going.
Equal priorities then?
Equal priorities, yeah. But I think people want good roads. I mean, we have pretty high taxes in comparison to a lot of states throughout the country, and I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that we have good roads and good infrastructure.
And the environment, PFAS and other water contaminants are a concern for a growing number of Wisconsinites. Do you see this as an important issue, and how would you propose addressing it?
Well, it is an important issue. I did some research on PFAS when I heard about that in recent years, and it causes some major health concerns, potentially major health concerns. And so I think it's important. I think everybody wants to have good, clean drinking water. I think that's reasonable for everybody, and so I think it's a question about how we get there, right? And so really, what I would be cautious about is, I'm not in favor of going and kicking anybody off their land, and that may sound extreme, but I'm not in favor of just, hey, you're polluting the water, see you later type thing, when they may not know they're doing it. And I think that we need to help those people recognize those things and then say, how can we help you put this behind us and move on as a state? So
we are to our final two questions.
Sure.
How would you describe the leading differences between you and your opponent?
Well, I think one's Democrat, one's Republican. So we look at things probably a little bit different. I've never met Christy Welch, that is her name. So I'll let her answer her own questions. But for me, I feel like I bring a lot of different experiences to the table. I grew up in a little town in Iowa. I grew up in a poor family. My dad was a meat factory worker, and that's just how I grew up. And then fast forward a little bit through the military that you've heard about in this interview, and then now I'm a business owner, and so I've seen a lot of different things, and I think that really bodes well to the people of the 88th district, that I can really help them from all different angles.
Final question. Let's say you're elected this November and you get a magic wand you can use in the state capitol to resolve one issue in a way that brings all parties together. What would that issue be?
Yeah, so my kids are Harry Potter fans, and so is my wife.
You're familiar with magic wands, then?
Familiar with magic wands. If I could do that, I'd really just like to take all the elected officials in January after we swear in and go back in time and go to where our founding fathers were literally penning the framework of our Constitution of the United States. Okay, and then with that, what is Wisconsin's role within that penmanship, right? And I think if we saw what our founding fathers intended for our country, why those certain things were done, the importance of protecting our liberties and freedoms, and how we can do that at a state level in the state legislature, and then use that magic wand to bring us all back. I would be interested to see how that changes how we approach things.
All right, thank you, Ben Franklin of De Pere, the Republican candidate in the 88th Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Ben Franklin, thank you for talking with WisconsinEye.
Yeah, thank you.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.